I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained. But I just want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail you everything I can on what happened on the scariest night of my life. We had just received word from dispatch to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood whose name I will not disclose for their privacy. It was me and my partner. Let's call him Paul, and I'll go by Mike. We arrived sometime after midnight. The street is dead. Everyone is sound asleep at this point. We park our patrol car in front of the aforementioned house and exit the vehicle. We knock on the door and let our presence known. Police, is anyone home? A little girl, 8 to 10 in appearance, opens the door and peeks through the gap. Hey. I crouch to make myself less intimidating. Is your parent or guardian home? She shakes her head. My first thought was that she probably had the TV a little too high and woke up the neighbors. But before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors, then part, I heard the sound of crashing silverware coming from what I presumed would be the kitchen. The entire house was nearly pitch black. The girl answering the door and shaking her head let me know she was alone, which makes whoever made that noise an intruder, as far as it concerns me. I asked the girl to step outside and turned to Paul. Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous? Paul gave me a cold stare as the girl giggled. They went to go wait by the car as I slowly pushed the door all the way open. Police, if there is anyone in this house, please let yourself be known. Without a warrant, I had no right to enter the building. I tried my best to spot whoever made the noise, but it is too dark to see. Just any sign of a threat, and I would be justified to search the house. But nothing. I left the door open and headed back towards Paul and the girl. Hey again, I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike. This is my partner Paul. If I may ask, what is your name? Maribel. That's a pretty name. So Maribel. Again, if I may ask, where is your family? As soon as I had finished my sentence, the television in the living room turned on, volume fully up. Me and Paul quickly turned in surprise and could see the television playing static from outside. We put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety, as no civilians were allowed in the front seats. We then, against our better judgment, enter the house. We tried every switch in the house, but no lights came on. While wandering the house cautiously, I would catch a person standing in the mirrors. I thought it was Paul, but every time I looked behind me, Paul was nowhere to be found. As I returned to the front door along with Paul, we both jumped as running footsteps echoed down the hall. We detached our firearms and aimed it at the source. The footsteps got louder and got closer, but no one ever appeared physically. Lamps, chairs, and other stuff started getting thrown around by an invisible force as the footsteps reached us. We sprinted out of the house and waited by the front yard. The footsteps seemed to stop, followed by the police siren that went off. I ran to the car and silenced the siren. I looked back at Paul, who seemed shook. You all right, Paul? He takes a lollipop out of its package and puts it in his mouth. Yep. I opened the rear door and checked up on Maribel. You okay? She nodded her head, so I walked back to Paul. I don't know what to make of this, he said. Yeah, me neither. No. Seriously. Ignore the running invisible man that knocked everything down for a second. All the family photos, pictures on the wall. He points at Maribel. She's not in any of them. So what are you thinking? The footsteps led outside. Then the siren goes off. There's a million buttons in that car. What are the chances? Paul, are you trying to tell me that Maribel is haunted? How do you explain what we just saw? I'm sure there's an explanation. The TV turns on when we take Maribel outside, prompting us to check it out. Someone or something shows up in the mirrors, but ducks away. I remember wanting to shut him up, not because he wasn't making any sense, but because he was. I know you've seen it. It was prowling around. Then it runs outside and gets in the car. Tries all the buttons. I think a ghost is trying to get to the girl. I just stood there, not sure what to say, until Paul decided to start walking back towards the house. Paul, what are you doing? It only shows up in the mirrors. That's how we find it. I followed him inside and watched as he takes a book from the counter and breaks the nearest mirror. "What's the matter with you? That's someone's property." He takes a shard and hands another to me. It's not every day you get to arrest a ghost. We aimed our flashlights all over the house, waiting for something to appear in the broken glass. I recall praying to God Almighty to not let anything show up, but it did. I panicked as it swung its red bony arm at my back. It ripped right through my uniform, causing me to fall forward. I dropped the glass, which broke into smaller chunks. It continued clawing at my shirt and flesh, but stopped when Paul opened fire. I heard it screech, fading as Paul helped me up. We both then hurried back outside to find Maribel missing from the back seat. It was difficult explaining what happened to the department without sounding like nut jobs. The police cameras who we were betting on to prove our stories had shut off the moment we entered the house. The thing, whatever it was, must have turned them off while we were unaware. The only part of our story that our police captain took seriously was the girl, Maribel. The captain brought up a missing person report and asked us if this was the girl we saw. It was. It's been just a few days since I gave up the badge to save whatever little pride I could spare. I just ask to whoever reads this and to whomever it may reach. The next time a door opens on its own, or things move by themselves in your home. In the 90s, before I was born, my mom lived in Atwater, California. Let me tell you, that house was the worst in terms of ghost experiences for her. Plus, a lot of negative activity was happening in her life, but that's a whole other story. Let me just say it was very depressing and negative period in her life. They were struggling. Anyways, one time my mother was about to go for a nap. My dad was working at the time, so she was alone. When my mother went to her room, she heard something hitting the window, like pebbles were being thrown at it. She was annoyed, so she moved the blinds and saw 3 kids in black hoodies run away as if being mischievous. Weird. Shortly after, she heard footsteps in the attic above, so she went to check, and the scariest fucking thing that would make you shit your pants happened. She saw a kid in the corner of the attic smiling at her. She described the smile as that guy who did the notorious Colorado movie theater shooting, his mugshot, where they're smiling and there's no soul behind their eyes. Exactly like that, she said. She wasn't scared, just angry that a random person was in her attic. She yelled out, "What are you doing?" No response, just smiling. I'm telling you, this woman has balls of steel. So she called my father to come home right now. The weird thing is that the phone kept going static when she called him. But regardless, he came home. Now here's where it gets weird. My mom told him to follow her and look at this crazy person in our attic. They both went to look, and the kid is still there smiling. My dad said he doesn't see anyone. What is she talking about? My mom is saying, "He's right there. He's right there." And my dad said, "I don't see anyone." Eventually, the kid just disappeared. Another experience she had was when she was driving in LA on the freeway with my dad. There was a car in front of them and a lady driving. Suddenly, that woman turned her head around and stared right at my mom, smiling crazily whilst driving. Like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, when she turned her head around and smiled. Again, my dad didn't see what she was talking about, making my mom look crazy. My aunt, who lived near them at the time and was a kid, had her own experiences living there too. Worse than my mom's, to a point she had to sleep in the hallway. It was so bad, her room was extremely haunted, as well as the house. That's a whole other story too. Now, this experience my mom had happened in Arizona at our old house. This was after I was born, and I had my own experiences there too as a kid. She was reading a ghost book. She was alone, and suddenly she heard a man laugh and cackle evil-like in our living room. Now this actually scared her. She ran to that room, angry too. Nobody was there, and she prayed to rebuke any demons. It was gone. I believe my maternal side of the family is very sensitive to ghosts. I don't know why we see things. I wish I had answers, but we just do, unfortunately. Even my grandma's psychiatrist back then mentioned that she senses she is psychic. I'm not sure what kind of psychic, but she just is. My grandma must have told her experiences that she won't tell us. She doesn't like talking about them. But she did say in Atwater one time, she saw an extremely tall woman walking in the hallway at night. Even today, sometimes I feel like I see things too, but nothing bad. just shadows in the corner of my eye, and it rarely happens. As a Christian, I just pray for any demons to be rebuked. It works. I believe we live in a very spiritual world. Things around us that we can't see. But sometimes they slip through, and sometimes I believe they're straight up demons wanting to mess with you. If any of you have experiences similar to this, I would love to know. I've always been fascinated with the paranormal. In the past year or so, I've seen 3 figures while working in a group home. With each figure I've seen, my brain instantly assumed that it was a specific person, before quickly realizing it couldn't have been that person, or that anyone was even there. I'm not the first person to have seen something at this group home. Coworkers past and present have mentioned witnessing unexplained phenomena, with most of the reports being of shadow figures. As in, they straight up saw a shadow that moved like a person. However, when I saw the figures, they weren't shadows. Basically, I'd seen something and my brain would tell me, so-and-so just went into the kitchen, or so-and-so just walked past me, only for me to realize that nobody had been there. People have also reported hearing strange voices over monitors during third shift, TVs or lights turning on by themselves, or hearing doors slam with no one around to do so. Multiple people witnessed a curtain unfurl itself. One night, 2 staff were working third shift together. They were both sitting at the table together when suddenly one of their phones started ringing with a messenger call. She goes to answer it and sees that it was from the other staff that she was sitting there talking to, but the other staff had their phone plugged in and charging in the kitchen. The other staff goes to check on their phone, and lo and behold, it was calling the girl on Facebook. So there have been a lot of creepy instances at work, and I find most of my coworkers credible, although I'm sure some have embellished their paranormal stories. My first experience happened probably around a year ago. I was sitting at the computer desk in the living room, facing the kitchen doorway. I was the only staff in the living room at the time, so I had to watch over the residents while the other 2 staff were assisting some of the residents to bed. Suddenly, I saw someone walk into the kitchen, and though I didn't get a close look at them, my mind instantly assumed it had been one of the residents. I'll call him Adam. We only have 3 residents in the home that walk unassisted, and the gait and stature matched Adam. After about 5 seconds, I remembered that Adam wasn't even home. Confused and wondering if maybe Adam had come home early from the movies with another staff, I went into the kitchen only to see nobody in there. The kitchen isn't very big, with nowhere for someone to hide behind, and there is no other exit. So if I had truly seen someone walk in there, they would have still been in there. I thought it was super weird, but just brushed it off, thinking my mind was just playing tricks on me. Adam came home later on and got a kick out of it when I told him I had seen him walking into the kitchen while he was out watching a horror movie. The next experience I had happened earlier this year. Once again, I was watching over the living room as other staff were assisting other residents to bed. One of the staff came out into the living room, and we talked a little bit before they took some soiled clothes to the laundry room. They came out shortly after and went into the kitchen, so I was going to go back down the hall to finish what I had to do. That's when I thought the other staff, a bigger girl I'll call Beth, way taller than me and heavyset, had walked past me carrying stuff to take to the laundry room. Again, I didn't get a good look at Beth, but I could have sworn she had just walked past me. But when I walked down the hall, I almost ran into Beth as she was coming out of another resident's room. Within mere seconds, I told her what had just happened, and we were both confused as she had obviously been assisting one of the residents to get ready for bed. I went right back down to the laundry room, and there was nobody in there. That kind of shook me up because I couldn't really find a reasonable explanation for that, and it reminded me of when I had seen Adam. This last experience literally happened the other day. I was assisting one of the residents with his BiPAP machine and getting him ready for bed when I turned and saw one of the staff, I'll call her Kathy, walking past his open doorway. I remember seeing her pink sweatshirt, one she wears frequently, and assuming she was going down to check on one of the residents at that end of the hallway. When I was done, about 10 seconds later, I went to go check to see if Kathy needed help. but she wasn't anywhere to be found. I called her name, and she didn't respond. When I went back out to the living room, Kathy was sitting at the table, so I asked her if she had gone down the hall. She said no, and I realized that she was wearing a different sweatshirt than the one I had just seen. Still pink, but it was a darker pink. She said I probably saw Sam walk by, but I told her that I was in Sam's room helping him to bed at the time, and that I had seen her walk by with her lighter pink sweatshirt. The other staff vouched for the fact that Kathy had been in the living room that whole time. This instance was the most unsettling for me because this time I had noticed a specific detail: Kathy's sweatshirt. I've only ever experienced this at work and have never really had any other unexplained experiences. A handful of past residents have passed in the home, although none of the figures I'd seen resembled any of the residents I had known or any that I had been made aware of. I've tried to rationalize this, but I haven't been able to come up with any explanations that satisfy me. I get plenty of sleep most nights, so it's not like I'd be having sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations. I highly doubt it's carbon monoxide related. I don't believe there are any potential sources of carbon monoxide in the home, and detectors would be mandatory anyway, I'm sure. I was a bit stressed on the night that I saw Kathy, but don't recall being particularly stressed during either of the other incidents. Toxic mold? I've read that toxic mold can potentially cause hallucinations, but haven't really noted any other signs or symptoms of that in myself or any of the residents/staff working in the home. I've always been intrigued by unexplained paranormal stories, but I've also been kind of a skeptic too. I've been trying to rack my brain for a logical explanation for these sightings, but can't really come to a conclusion. Lol. I've only been experiencing anything like this at work, and the fact that other people have talked about strange things has made me think maybe there is something paranormal going on. Either that or I'm starting to have hallucinations, and that freaks me out quite a bit.